I wonder, do you ever ask yourself this question, why am I doing this? Do you ever have those moments on a Monday morning when you wake up and you're about to head out to work or log on for work or school or college or whatever it is that consumes most of your time, and you think to yourself, why am I doing this? And that nagging question starts to creep in alongside this. What's the point in all of this? Maybe for you, it's the endless commute, sitting in traffic or crammed into a train for hours every single week. And you wonder to yourself, what's the point? There's got to be more to life than this endless pursuit of just trying to get through the grind so that I can get to the weekend, only to repeat that process over and over again. Maybe for you, you work from home and actually you're faced with those same four walls every day, going from Zoom call to Zoom call to Zoom call, or Teams, if you can figure out how to work Teams. I don't get on with that at all. And you're sort of longing for some sort of deeper meaning or deeper connection. You have that strange sense, even though you spend time with people digitally throughout your whole day, you still feel strangely disconnected. Or maybe for you, you're in a place of work that you don't feel valued. You're surrounded by colleagues who drain you and just make life more difficult and life more harder than it is. Maybe your working days are beyond you or behind you, and you find yourself now retired and you're asking yourself this question: does what I do still count for anything? Maybe you're a stay-at-home parent. You don't have a job, or you're a student, or you volunteer, and you pour energy into that daily cycle of nappies or picking up kids or preparing meals, and you're still asking yourself this question: does what I do still count for anything? Maybe you ask yourself this question: does anybody ever notice what I do? Maybe you're a student battling with assignments or prepping for exams. Whatever it is, wherever you find yourself in the majority of your time, do you have that sense of, is there more? Does it matter? Is there a bigger picture? Maybe you love your work, but you still have that sense of emptiness, that sense of, I need something more or more purpose in my life. Maybe your life feels a little bit reduced to transactions. You're ticking boxes, you're chasing targets, you're working for a paycheck and thinking, there's got to be something deeper. There's got to be something more. Is my life just about transactions? I wonder if you ever think something like this. Could there be a bigger story that gives purpose to what I do day in and day out? Well, this is exactly what we're going to look at today, and actually throughout this series that we're talking or we're exploring. What we're going to explore today speaks right to the heart of this experience. We're in the second part of our Fruitfulness on the Front Line series, and for 6 weeks we're exploring 6 practical ways where we can find purpose and meaning and fruit on our front line. And our front line is those places that we find ourselves in the majority of our time. So just think about your front line for a moment now. Just call that to mind. Where is that? Where will you be this time tomorrow? This is the stuff that we're talking about. And how do we allow our faith or where we're exploring faith to intersect with our front line? And last week we kicked off the series by talking about modeling godly character. Who we are speaks far louder than what we say. And we discovered that we can have a positive impact on the world around us, on the people around us, when we model godly character, when we reflect the goodness of who God is and what God is like. And today we're going to carry that on, and we're going to think about, well, what does this look like? What does it look like to model godly character in reference to our work on our front line? So the second principle we're going to look at today is making good work. And as we're going to think about this, we're going to think about, how would Jesus act if he was in our shoes? What would Jesus do? We often, that's a question people often ask. What would Jesus do? So if Jesus was on your front line, if Jesus was faced with the things that you're faced with, if Jesus interacted with the people that you interact with, what would he do? How would he go about that work? What would his work ethic be? And this is a really important thing to consider. If you're a follower of Jesus, if you're somebody who said, yes, I believe in Jesus and I want to follow you, that means you've signed up to actually living your life as Jesus would if he was in your shoes, in your situation. And what does it look like for you to follow Jesus into your front line and live out those character and those purposes that he has for you? But if you're somebody who's still trying to figure this out and you're exploring faith, maybe you're curious of faith, maybe you're even skeptical about faith, I still think there's value in this for you. You know, many people who've explored the person of Jesus, the character of Jesus, see the positive impact that he's had on the world. People who don't believe that Jesus is who he claims to be still recognize the good in him and the goodness that he brought to the world around him. That he's totally shaped or reshaped the course of human history. So even if you're still trying to figure out who Jesus is and how he fits into the divine nature and all of that sort of stuff, actually thinking about how do we imitate or follow Jesus and learn from him in our workplaces is a good thing, because he actually taught us and showed a bunch of really positive things about how we can do that. So let's take some time to explore Jesus's attitude and approach to work. And it might surprise you or might not surprise you that before Jesus went public in his ministry, before he was a rabbi or he went around teaching people and performing miracles, he had a 9-to-5 job. He had an ordinary, everyday job. Jesus was a carpenter. Actually, more literally, he was probably a builder. The Greek word for carpenter is the same word that we use for builder or tradesman or artisan. And Jesus probably spent more time working with stone than he did with wood, largely because there wasn't a lot of wood that was used for building in that place. If you've ever been to Israel, all the buildings are made of stone, not made of wood. So he had this just normal, everyday job. His father, Joseph, was a carpenter, was a builder, and we think he followed in those footsteps. And people knew him for it. Actually, people knew him as a carpenter. He was known for his trade. And the point that I just want to make here before we dive in is Jesus understands the everyday. He understands everyday 9-to-5 work. He did it for many years, and he did it well. As we read through the pages of the New Testament and the Gospels, the stuff that we hear about his work is that he was respected for it. And then Jesus sort of transitions from being this laborer, this carpenter, this builder, into being a rabbi, into being somebody who travels around and tells people about God, and he performed a bunch of miracles. And that was confusing for people because, you know, certainly the people in his hometown, when Jesus was teaching in the synagogue, they're like, aren't you, you're Joseph's and Mary's boy, you're the carpenter, you know, and now you're in this role. I mean, it just didn't make sense to them. It was a transition that people struggled with. But what was it like for Jesus? What was that transition like for him coming out of his 9-to-5 and going into this other part of life? Well, we're going to look at something that sort of is right at the beginning of Jesus' public ministry. And there's a story about a wedding in Cana. That's the Facebook pictures from the wedding. And Jesus and his disciples are invited to the wedding, and Mary, Jesus' mother, is there. And weddings in this culture are not a small event. They lasted for days, often for weeks at a time. And, you know, it's part of the groom's family responsibility to sort of host the guests and ensure that there's enough food and that there's enough drink for people to last for that whole time. Running out of food or running out of wine would be a social disaster. And if you know the story of the wedding in Cana, you know that's exactly what happened. They ran out of wine. And John is recording these events for us. John was an eyewitness to the life of Jesus. We think John was probably there, and as he tells the story, he sort of has that tone that he was there, he witnessed these things. And it says this: when the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." This is a massive embarrassment to the groom. It's actually an insult to the guests in that culture. And Mary comes up to Jesus and he tells him, Jesus, they've got no more wine. And she's doing that not because she's gossiping. We think that because of this, it shows that Mary is involved in the planning and the preparation of the wedding. That would mean that Mary and Jesus, their family, is closely linked or closely associated with the groom's family. So So Mary's part of the inner circle. And she sees this disaster has happened, and this isn't going to be good for the family. This is going to not be great for their reputation. It's not going to be great for this celebration. So she goes up to Jesus and says, Jesus, they've run out of wine. And I wonder what she's expecting Jesus to do about it. Okay, I'm just going to knock over to Majestic Wines and bring back a couple of crates. Now, what does Mary expect Jesus to do in this culture? See, the thing is, Mary knows that Jesus is special. She knows that her son is from God. She knows that there is the divine about Jesus. But for 30 years, Jesus is 30 at this point. There's not been many signs apart from those angels that appeared to announce his birth and the stuff around his birth. There's not been many things since Jesus was born that points to his true identity. What is Mary expecting? And Jesus' response is telling, woman, why do you involve me? Jesus replied, my hour has not yet come. And I read this, and we read this, it sounds a bit blunt, it sounds a bit rude, but Jesus isn't being rude to his mother. He's responding in a formal, respectful way. And he's literally saying, Mum, what's it got to do with me or you? And Mary could say, well, it's got a lot to do with us because we're part of the planning and the preparation here. But this bit, he says, my hour has not yet come. See, Mary knows who Jesus is. Mary knows about Jesus' destiny and his identity. And I wonder if she's thinking to herself, if not now, when? When will your time come? And the interesting thing in this, and I'm just going to speak about some of the things that we don't know, but I'm intrigued. What would have happened in this story if Mary hadn't come to Jesus? Those of you who knows what's going to happen, and we're going to read on in a minute, but what would have happened if Mary didn't come to Jesus and tell him they've run out of wine? Would Jesus have done anything at this point? See, the thing about Jesus, this is the confusing thing, and Tim mentioned this as he set up Theology Academy and talking about the Trinity, is that Jesus is 100% God. But at the same time, he's also 100% man. He's 100% human. I know those two don't add together. He's not a hybrid. He's not part God and part man. He has the fullness of God, but he's fully human at the same time. And I wonder, and I might be wrong on this, but I wonder whether there's something going on here about Jesus perhaps needing a bit of a nudge or a push to step into his true nature, to step into his divinity. And because he responds, what's it got to do with us? My hour has not yet come. I wonder what Mary will say to encourage her son. His mother said to the servants, do whatever he tells you. She ignores the statement. She ignores the question from Jesus. And she turns to the servants and she says, I want you to do whatever Jesus tells you to do. And then she steps back and she lets Jesus get to work. And we read on, it says, nearby stood six stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, fill the jars with water. So they filled them to the brim. Now, this isn't a simple task. 6 jars, each holding 20 to 30 gallons. That's about 120 to 180 gallons of water that they needed to put into these jars. And these jars, they're not lightweight. They're carved out of stone. They're not these nice decorative stone jars. They are heavy when they are empty. They are backbreaking when they are full. And Jesus says, I want you to fill all 6 of these jars with water. And how did they do that? Well, they didn't just lift them up and take them over to the tap or turn on the garden hose and just stood there whilst they were filling up. There were no taps. There were no hoses. These jars were filled probably from a well or a cistern, with smaller containers. Each one was taken up and then tipped into the jar. This was time consuming. It was drawn out. It was sweaty. It was muscle aching. It was hard work. This is not glamorous at all. And the thing is, nobody at the party is going to know. Nobody at this place is going to know the amount of time and effort and energy that these servants put into this work. But the servants still do it, and they do it with diligence. And this shows us something about what does it mean to make good work? What does service look like? Good work requires effort. Good work is about giving your all. Good work is about putting your back into it, even when people won't see, even when people won't notice what you've done. And Jesus says, then he told them, now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. The master of the banquet is sort of like the head waiter. It's a strange role. It's sort of like a best man, but also a wedding planner all rolled into one. The master of the banquet is in charge of what's going on and ensuring that they don't run out of wine and all of these sort of things. So Jesus says to the servants, so you've got these 6 jars of water. I want you to take some out. Get a glass. Or whatever you use, take it out and take it to the master of the banquet. Now, I'm not sure how what happened next happened or when it happened. But again, I'm just going to, share my theory on this. I think as the servants looked into those jars of water, those urns, they were still water. As Jesus said these words, draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet, I don't think they had turned into wine. I think it was still water, and they're looking at it and thinking, well, this is a bit scary, it's a bit terrifying. And they take it out. And the thing that's going on here, now it could have turned into wine, but, just from the other stuff that we see about who Jesus is and what Jesus has done, there's a story of the feeding of the 5,000, and they had 5 loaves and a couple of fish, and he says to the disciples, I want you to feed them with this. I don't think that at that point when Jesus said to the disciples, go and feed this crowd, that there was tons and tons of food. I think there was still just 5 loaves and 2 fish, and it took faith for them that as they went out and started giving away this food, that it didn't disappear, that there was enough. I think that's what's going on here. So these servants exercise great faith, and they take the water to their boss. Their job are on the line. And look what happens. They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine, and he said, everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you've saved the best till now. This is the first miracle that we hear about in Jesus. And it's not a huge one. It's not bringing people back from the dead. It's not healing people. That stuff will come. The first miracle speaks to his generosity. The first miracle that Jesus had is the drinks are on me. And not just any drinks, like the best wine that they've ever tasted. And you might be sitting there thinking a little bit uncomfortable, like, is this appropriate for Jesus to be turning water into wine? Should he be promoting that stuff? Again, we need to understand the culture of the time. Wine was the everyday drink because it was a lot safer to drink than water. So this is just part of the culture. The issue isn't drinking the wine, it's what people did with the wine and how much wine that they drank. But so Jesus has done this amazing miracle, and there was a problem. And Jesus met that problem, but he didn't just meet that problem, he exceeded that problem. He could have just made bog standard, cheap wine, because nobody would have noticed really. But he didn't. He brought out the best wine. He made the best wine. He exceeded expectations. This is good works. It's not about doing the minimum. It's about blessing others with excellence. And excellence is about giving of our best. It's about giving all that we have. And the thing I love about this story is, who are the first people to witness the first miracle of Jesus? It's not the bride or the groom. It's not the honored guests. It's the servants. They are the ones who had a front row view to the kingdom of God unfolding before them. And just imagine the stories that they told when they went home that evening, that they got not only to witness it, but they got to be part of this amazing thing that points to the goodness of God, that points to the generosity of God. This is all about doing things with excellence. And excellence isn't about just trying to impress people. Excellence is about giving our best. Excellence is about bringing all that we have to bless the people around us. One of our values at FBC is give our best, because we want to do this. We recognize that the people that we serve deserves our best, but we also recognize that the God we worship deserves our best. We don't want to say, well, that will do, because that will not do in the kingdom of God. We want to give everything that we have, not because we want people to say good things about us, or we want to look good in people's eyes. We want to give our best because we think actually God deserves our best. And serving him is an act of worship, is an act of devotion to him. So we're going to hear a real-life example of how this sort of stuff is worked out in the everyday. Throughout this series, we're going to try and interview different people about their frontline and how these things we're talking about intersect. So please welcome to the stage Matt Parting, everybody. Got to keep clapping till he's here. Yeah. Let's bring you in there. So, Matt, thanks for being here.
Pleasure.
Just for people who don't know you, introduce yourself. Who are you? What do you do?
I'm Matt Parting. I come here to FBC.
Excellent.
Married to Catherine. Got children, Simeon and Martha. They're around. I think Martha's working upstairs. And we've been coming for about 4 years now.
Cool. And what do you do? Where's your front line?
What do I do? Well, I feel very blessed. My front line is very obvious. I'm a head teacher of a primary school in Reading, in Coley Park, which is the most deprived area of Reading, and one of the most, it's the most densely packed area outside of London that we have. So it's a very, very deprived area, and I've been there about the same, about 4 years.
About 4 years. And describe, what's the school like, or what was it like when you went?
So it was the typical worst school in Reading. Officially, it had been in special measures since 2014. I was actually there as a teacher in 2014 when we went into special measures, and the decline kind of set in for well over a decade. School numbers down, typed in with COVID, the areas, deprivation as well, getting worse and worse. So the school was in quite a lot of trouble. I was very comfy in an outstanding school, head teacher of an outstanding school in Woking, which was dead boring. Apologies if your children went to but and then God very, very clearly said, that's where you're going back. And I was the 13th head in 9 years when I returned. So that gives you an idea of the kind of turnover of leadership and staff and just the turmoil that community were in.
So that was then.
That was then.
But things have changed a bit.
They have, yes. And you've said, right, here's 4 minutes to talk about what that 4 years looks like. Yeah, thanks for that.
So just
in a nutshell.
So we are
now good with outstanding school. People are choosing us as a school.
I think let's just pause. Yeah.
Thank you. And people are choosing us. Parents are choosing us. And the impact that will have on that community. It will take 10 years, but it means that families stay in the area. It means regeneration. We've opened a community centre. It's written on the back behind me up there. So that's the vision that I took into the school. I can't take full credit for it. I think Jesus said it first. But I like to feel like I really embodied it.
Cool.
And yeah, it's about life in all its fullness for everyone, the community, the teachers, the children, the staff, everyone.
So that is amazing. So the school was in, through Ofsted, was in special measures, needed lots of work, and that's turned around, so it's now rated as good with some outstanding things. So the question I want to know is how?
Yes, and you've given me 3 minutes, 3 seconds.
So keep going.
Excellent. So how do we do that? So this is not a management talk, you'll be pleased to know, although management is a big part of it. But I've been asked this question a lot because essentially those other head teachers were good head teachers. I worked under 4 of them when I was there. There's nothing wrong with them as head teachers. They probably worked harder than me. They definitely worried about stuff more than me. People have essentially said, what's your secret? And my secret is not a secret. It's written on every wall in my school. It's God, it's Jesus, and it's the purpose that he sent me there to do. But how have I made that? How does that work? Well, essentially, I try and speak. I listen to that song a lot, I speak Jesus. I try and speak and embody Jesus every time I drive into Coley Park in the way that I treat people, in the way that I serve my staff, in the way that, my staff, the feedback in the last Ofsted was that they feel that they're managed through kindness, which was amazing for me to hear. And I try and give time and love. I love the community. And I think this is, I've tried to break it into 3 for you here, Chris. And the first one is all around...
like that.
The
Do they all
first
start
one,
with the same letter?
No, A-R-Y. No,
Okay.
There's no acronym. I'll do that next time.
Yeah.
But the first one is all around authenticity. And ultimately, the staff, the children, the community, and that community have lost faith in social services, the police. They've been let down by everyone at some point in their life. But I think they recognize in me an authenticity in how I love and how I treat them. And that is purely not always natural. I mean, I do like people, but I have asked God to give me love for that community, and trust me, some days you really need it, and He does. He is abundantly. I mean, I have it now tattooed on my arm. That really helps. I mean, that's a whole other story. Basically, don't promise your staff stuff that you're not willing to go through with. But it is, and that really helps me when I'm driving into work. I remember that actually life in all its fullness is for everyone, and they read it on the wall and they believe it for themselves.
Yeah, but I mean, that's amazing, and embodying those values, being authentic to that is a great starting point, but you then still have to do something.
Yes, so, and it's funny, just listening to you talking about those servants, because actually you used the word faith, which is absolutely what those servants had. I'd actually use the word risk. So I am a nightmare to line manage. I'm part of a multi-academy trust, so I do actually have people that are supposedly trying to keep me on a fairly straight. And I would say, actually, if you were to look at the real reason why I have managed to succeed where 12 other head teachers didn't, is that, two things. I believe in people, not processes, and they all started processes. But within that, I take probably too many risks, certainly for what we consider now to be quite. I mean, we have a guy at the Matt. His whole job is to avoid risk, and I know there's.
I bet he loves you.
So we have robust conversations, but I take risks, and those servants were taking a risk, weren't they?
Yeah.
They were risking, and I don't take them recklessly because that's really important. I take them because I recognise that, and I was saying this to someone before the service. Ultimately, it's not my problem. The school is God's problem. Yeah. My staff are God's problem. The community is God's problem. I'm not called to fix this. I'm called to be there and listen and try and do the best that I can. And some of the risks we've taken are huge. So staff is a really good example. I've hired some people that other schools wouldn't touch. Now, I've done that because actually I've seen something in them that I think we can build out. It backfires. Risk is not without risk, funnily enough. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a risk. But actually, 80% of the time, people believed in grow, and then they'll give you more back than you get. We do ridiculous things. Some of you will know that we go to, our year sixes go to the Arctic Circle, and to Finland, up into the Arctic Circle. They do this amazing trip. When I was offered that trip, I immediately said no, and then I was like, hang on, this is because and the natural thought was, this is not something a school like ours does. We can't afford it. The children can't afford it. Most of them don't have passports, blah, blah. And then we did it. And when I booked it and said yes, we couldn't afford it. But actually, God has provided amazingly in that case. We're actually fully funded for that trip now for 2 years. Amazing. And that's, so that's just that. I opened 2 SEN units. My boss has a letter from the DFE, the Department of Education, which he won't give me because he knows I'll frame it, which he said was the most strongly worded letter of kind of telling off Matt has ever received, because I opened my units 2 years early, because you meant to wait for the DFE to come and say yes and all that stuff, but the children were there, and I thought, you know what, this is my favorite, my boss loves this phrase, it's never wrong to do the right thing. She loves it when I say that. But it isn't. We took risks, and God has blessed us in those risks. He has been abundant in what he has brought into the school. So yeah, I would say being authentic with the people that are there, making sure that you ask God. If you can't love them, ask God to give you that love. They will know. People can sniff out authenticity. And there's so much out there that's not authentic. And if I was trying to think of Jesus, I think he just must have bled authenticity. Like when he meets the woman at the well, like she immediately knows he's not being condescending. She immediately knows he's not being sarcastic. Or, do you know what I mean? It must have just oozed out of him, just that authentic love, and that's ultimately what I try and do that tomorrow morning on a Monday. I will try and be authentic love tomorrow on a Monday morning.
And take risks and value people.
Absolutely.
And speak Jesus.
Yeah.
So what would you say to people who maybe their front line isn't as defined as yours? You know, how can you encourage us to make good work where we are?
So I think I said it, I feel really blessed. Often I'm sitting here, we talk about frontline quite a lot in other ways, don't we? And I do feel blessed. I say it to Catherine all the time, because actually my front line whacks me in the face the minute I get through the door at work. It's really obvious what I'm meant to be doing, who I'm meant to be helping. And I recognise that actually that isn't always the case. I've certainly been in jobs where I too was like, okay, where is? But and this is something that God, I think, has really been talking to me about recently, because there's so much going on in the world. I mean, my degree is in politics and philosophy, so I easily get sucked in. I mean, America is keeping me up till 1. I just love watching
Let's
it.
come back.
Sorry,
We're at 9 minutes.
I know. I can see it. But the point is, there's so much going on in the world. So much going on in the world. And so, thanks, Tim. We knew it was going to happen at some point.
Come on.
I've done really well. This is a lot to say. But the point is, there's so much going on. And absolutely, it feels totally overwhelming at points. I really believe, and I think this is the key, that God will give you your patch. Yeah. He will give you your patch. And he's given me mine, and every time I'm overwhelmed by what Trump is doing, or what Gaza's doing, what Russia's doing, or just within our own country and the things that we see going around, it can feel so overwhelming. Where are you in all of this, God? Well, actually, we're not meant to know. We invented news, we invented phones and tweeting and Twitter. We're meant to know what's going on around us. The disciples would not have known what was going on around. Like, what's in front of me? What's my patch? And if you ask God, what's my patch? Who's my patch? Where's my patch? Yeah. He will tell you. And actually, when you reduce yourself back to that, life's much simpler and much easier. That. So that would be my advice. Ask God, who is in my patch? What is my patch? Who's there? What do you want me to do? And my experience is he will bless you mightily in that.
Absolutely. Let's show our appreciation to Matt. That's so good.
So is that right? How far over was that?
Like twice the time.
Twice the time.
I mean, yeah. That's just so inspiring, so encouraging that, from Matt's story and what he's talking about. But the thing that I love about that is it actually reminds me of the story we've been looking about. It reminds me of those servants in Cana who were faithful in those ordinary tasks, but were willing to go the extra mile. We were willing to bless people with excellence, not to impress people, but actually to give of their best and to be their best. And what we see through Matt's example, through our examples, through this example of the story of the wedding in Cana, is that God uses good work to bless others in extraordinary ways. That when we offer the little that we have and we offer it to God and say, would you take this and would you use this? He uses it, and he does things often that we don't even see. Doing things with excellence, making good work is not about impressing bosses. It's not about climbing the career ladder. It's not about winning awards. It's about doing that. It's about offering our tasks to God. It's about giving our trust and giving our best to him and trusting him to multiply it to do what only he can do. I want us to jump forward to something that a guy called Paul said. Paul was one of the leaders of the early church. He wrote lots of the letters that we find in the New Testament. And this we're going to look at is something he wrote to a church in a place called Colossae, which is in sort of modern day Turkey. It wasn't a special place. It was just a normal, everyday place. But in the midst of that culture and the context, Paul says this: whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters. And just imagine that Paul is saying this to you right now. Whatever you do, whatever your front line is, whatever you answer that question when people say, what do you do? Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart. Give your best. Be your best. Bless people with excellence. Why? Well, do it. Imagine that you're working for the Lord, and maybe some people struggle with the people that they're working with or the people that they're working for. And Paul encourages us to fix our hearts and our minds and our eyes upon the Lord, upon Jesus, and not work for human masters. Because when we let God be our motivation, when we let God be our inspiration, when we let our work, whatever it is, be an act of devotion, an act of worship to him, God does something amazing in it. But perhaps you're sitting there thinking, well, that's all right, Chris, but my work doesn't feel important. Maybe you spend your day answering emails or stacking shelves or managing spreadsheets or running errands, and it just feels unnoticed. It doesn't feel that important. So did fetching water in Cana. It was unnoticed. It didn't seem important, but God used it. Ordinary tasks offered to him carry extraordinary significance. Maybe you think, my workplace is difficult. And I get that. Sorry, my workplace isn't difficult. Tough colleagues, poor management, constant pressure. Integrity and patience and faithfulness still shines in these difficult situations. Your motivation doesn't have to come from the people around you. It can come from God. Maybe you're saying, I don't have paid work. But we've already talked about that. Work is more than a paycheck. Parenting, caring, studying, volunteering, these things shape lives, and God is there too. Before preaching or doing any miracles, Jesus had an ordinary 9-to-5 everyday job. He understands what it means to make good work. And here's the thing, that longing for purpose and meaning that you have deep inside of you comes from God who's put that in you. And that God who gave you that longing and that desire for purpose wants to meet you in the middle of your everyday task, to give you hope and to give you a sense of purpose and identity in it. We're going to get the band back up, and let's just jump back to these words from Colossians. Paul encourages us. I think actually he instructs us. If you're a Jesus follower, I think this is actually a command that we're compelled to do this. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters. And the reason why I think Paul compels us to do this is not because he wants something from us, it's because he wants something for us. Because this is an attitude that any of us can have. Whatever our status of faith or belief, we can have this attitude. And it has the power to totally transform how we see work. And, as we look back, if we look back with this sort of this intention, we can see that none of it was meaningless. Every single phone call made, every email answered, every conversation that you've had was not meaningless. God takes that ordinary and he uses it to ripple into eternity. He takes the ordinary, the everyday, even the mundane tasks that we do without even noticing. But when we do them as an act of worship and devotion to God, when we offer them to him, he takes it and he does things with them that we wouldn't even thought possible. And he actually does things with them that we won't even see. The ripples into eternity of the good work that we offer to him. Here's the thing. When we do this, when we make good work, when you bring your best, the ordinary becomes worship. The unseen becomes significant. And even the frustrating tasks become fruitful.